I was nearly beaten to death. I was instructed to get out of a vehicle, distracted, and as soon as I looked away, I was sucker punched in the face and then assaulted. The doctor said that if I were to have been hit or kicked one more time in this portion of my head, that I would have probably ended up as either a vegetable or dead.
You were 12 when you started your first car project.
I noticed my neighbor making a lot of money from mowing lawns, so I had my little red wagon that my grandfather had custom painted for me. I put the leaf blower, the weed whacker, and my gas can, and then tied a rope for the lawnmower, and I used my self-propelled mower to walk up and down the street and knock on people's doors. By 14, I had accumulated enough money to buy a 1968 Mustang Fastback. I had 4 cars by the time I was 17. Just bought the Mustang, traded for another Mustang plus some money. Then I sold that Mustang, bought a Chevelle, homeless at 17, after being moved from Dallas to Chicago, having a disaster up there, moving back, nearly dying, reconstructive surgery, homeless. It was like something clicked in my mind, like I don't belong here. I'm normal. They're just trying to label me as something I'm not.
Sounds like something out of a movie.
With my current group of companies, I was growing, 8 expansions in 8 years. We made what we thought was a well-educated decision to buy a multi-million-dollar building. It's been a steady threat of running out of money for the majority of the last 9.5 years.
We've been together for 10 years. It's been great. However, it's been the most difficult journey of my life.
The vast majority of people you meet will be holding on to something negative, the guilt, the negativity, the internal pain, and they let that live rent-free in their head and control their lives for so long. The human body naturally tells you to stop or quit when it's at about 40% of what it's capable of. A lot of people who feel like they're broken become unbroken by realizing that the struggle is what built you. This show is as much about surrender as it is no surrender. Hello, and thank you for joining us. The following is a conversation between my wife, Andrea, and me. She's interviewing me so we can introduce you to both No Surrender and me. We've created multiple 8-figure businesses from scratch and work insane hours, but we're making time to do this. Why? Because the world desperately needs a place where deep conversations about trials, tribulations, and lessons learned the hard way can be shared so others can pull themselves out of dark places in difficult situations. We're dealing with record levels of obesity, depression, and lack of job satisfaction. We also have an epidemic of social disconnect that ironically is a result of too much time spent on social media. We're doing this to help. I'm sharing very personal parts of my story first, not to make the show about me, but to set an example for others. Stick around for stories about everything from learning disabilities, to my family dealing with a divorce when I was young, to substance abuse, to being a standout athlete at 15, to nearly being beaten to death at 17, to the related facial cranial reconstructive surgery, to homelessness months later, and more. This is our first episode, but we sometimes refer to it as episode 0, as it's here to set the stage for what's to come. Thanks very much to Andrea for joining me on this journey, and to everyone else who's pushed me to share my stories, and for being so involved with No Surrender. And thanks so much to you for joining us on this journey. Please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss upcoming episodes from our incredible guests who will share so many lessons of immeasurable value. Welcome to No Surrender. This episode is brought to you by our partners over at Don't Trade It In. It's the best and fastest way to get top dollar for your car from the comfort of your home. Please visit don'ttradeitin.com today.
Content warning. Please note that this podcast episode discusses topics related to suicidal ideation. Listener discretion is advised.
Here we go. Episode number 1. And we are doing something different than you're going to see or than you've probably seen on most podcast episodes, especially episode number 1. And in this case, even though I'm the host, it's going to be hosted by my beautiful wife, Andrea. And we're doing this so everyone can get to know me and understand why we're doing this and what our mission is, and a little bit more about my story or some of my stories. But there's obviously, you'll understand here shortly why there's going to be multiple episodes where I tell a lot of different stories, because I was blessed by the man upstairs with a life filled with all sorts of wild and interesting things. So again, my wife, Andrea.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be the host and to be having this conversation on your very first episode. I have been pushing you to do this, and I'm so excited that within a month, we're just getting started and it's going to actually launch so fast. I want you to talk to me about what it means to you visiting rock bottom multiple times. I want you to take me back to your story so people understand who you are and where you're coming from.
Rock bottom to me means rock in bottom, rock being at the bottom, you would naturally envision a rock falling to the bottom of a lake or ocean or something like that. And I thought it was interesting. I worked with a guy that taught me a lot about luxury and highline vehicle sales, and he would say the saying, "I was lower than whale poop," which I thought was disgusting. And I have a creative mind. I'm thinking like a whale pooping and it falling all the way down to the bottom of the ocean.
My God.
But you like for me, I've been to the depths of the bottom. I say that relatively speaking. I understand some people are born without limbs and stuff like that, and some people get into accidents and never walk or talk or see or even live anymore. So I'm not trying to take anything away from anyone, but I will tell you that I've been low. So to me, could even mean suicidal thoughts. It could mean and related thoughts. Is this life worth living? Why are we here? Why does life have to be so hard? And when considering the amount of technology that we have on this planet, why why don't we use more of it to make people's lives easier than we currently do?
Yeah. It's probably somebody being at the bottom and not knowing what's next and feeling so helpless. Take me back to the very, very beginning. You were 12 when you started your first car project. At 12, it's not normal for somebody to start a project on an actual car.
I don't know if you've ever seen it or not. There's this meme of a baby in the womb steering and shifting and pushing the clutch. And that was me. Before I was even born, I was interested in cars and more than interested, obsessed. Just that's what I always wanted as a little boy, where I would always run to the cars when we would have indoor recess at the preschool I went to. I always wanted cars like the big wheels to ride around on when I was a kid, and I had a little Trans Am, Pontiac Trans Am pedal cart. And by the time I got to the point where it was somewhat safe to ride something motorized, I was obsessed with go-karts. And my dad had no interest in spending thousands of dollars on getting me what I really wanted, which was a shifter cart, so I could go race against other little kids and maybe become a race car driver. And so as time went by and I realized I would never get that shifter cart and everything that goes along with it, the racing and all that kind of stuff, which is very expensive, I was like, well, maybe I just go from a go-kart to a car. And I noticed my neighbor making a lot of money from mowing lawns. So I had my little red wagon that my grandfather had custom painted for me. It literally said Justin's wagon. I put the leaf blower, the weed whacker, and my gas can in the wagon and then tied a rope to the lawnmower. And I used my self-propelled mower to walk up and down the street and knock on people's doors.
At 12.
At 12. And by 14, I had accumulated enough money to buy a 1968 Mustang Fastback,
Wow.
which needed a lot of work, but it did run and drive when I bought it. So
your desire to become an entrepreneur, it happened when you were really, really young.
And it was ironic because I remember like yesterday, I was sitting out in front of the dry cleaners with my dad when I was really small. And for whatever reason, he was waiting on something that was important. He needed it for a meeting or something. And it was either the dry cleaners or the donut shop, something. But anyway, he would always read the Wall Street Journal. And at that time, I might not have even known about my dyslexia. Reading was like the last thing in the world that I wanted to do. So I would be like, why are you always reading that newspaper? And he was like, mark my words. If you could just find the time and the dedication to read one article out of this newspaper that comes out every day, if you could just do that once a day, you'll be a very rich man someday.
Wow. I don't think I knew that story.
No, I get the chills thinking about it because he was right on the one hand. On the other hand, we didn't really know I was dyslexic yet, and why it was so repulsive to me to think about reading the newspaper. Ironically, though, fast forward a couple of years, and what really actually got me to consider liking to read was a stack of his car magazines that I found in the corner of a room. And before I knew it, I knew the 0 to 60 times for the Lamborghinis and the Ferraris, and I knew the cost. I'd basically memorized pretty much everything that was good to know as a little car guy, and it definitely helped with my reading and writing. It was pretty interesting, mowing the lawns and then getting the car, and then, as I'm sure we'll touch on, that car I ended up selling and then bought another car. I had owned like 4 cars by the time I was 17.
Wow. I want to talk to you about the dyslexia. I feel like a lot of people don't understand, especially if they don't have it. I have noticed that a lot of famous and successful people have actually dyslexia. So I want to know how that shaped you to who you are today and your early struggles back in the day, because I'm sure you didn't even know you had it for a while.
Right, yeah, it was, well, that's a kind of a two-part question there. So number one, yes, there are, I mean, I could rattle off a lot, like at least 2 or 3 of the sharks on Shark Tank are
Uh-huh.
dyslexic. Sean Penn, Tom Cruise, a number of famous actors and actresses are dyslexic. And when I was 5 or 6, when they finally realized, like, the official diagnosis, like, what I know now about dyslexia, it wasn't even discussed back then. And more specifically, Malcolm Gladwell is one of my favorite authors, and he wrote a book called Outliers, and he goes deep into, like, people who are outliers, because some dyslexic people are what they call twice exceptional. So,
Mm.
it sounds cool, twice exceptional, but on the one hand, it means exceptionally, um, disabled, at least when they're young, from the dyslexia, and then exceptional, again, on in some cases, on the high end with, uh, IQ. So it's like the ultimate contradiction,
Right.
especially if you're a little boy and you can add mixed fractions in your head before being taught what they were. On the one hand, like,
At what age was that, by the way?
oh, 4.
Which is insane.
Yeah, my mom and grandmother were hanging some, curtains, and they were trying to figure out the spacing, to nail the mounts into the, or not nail, but screw the mounts into the wall. And my mom said something like 15 and a quarter, and then my grandmother said 14 and 3/4.
That's crazy.
And, I was like 30. And they were like, what?
That's insane.
And so they went from, like, saying things like, wow, he must be, or could be a genius, to when I would write my J, for example, when I was in first grade, it was like this, and my U would be,
That's actually right. Just kidding.
yeah, and then my S would look something like that,
Oh my
so
God.
it
Like
was,
totally backwards.
the T would look a little bit more like a J, the I would also look a little bit like a J, and then the N would, so basically the whole name.
And the thing about that is, like, of course, that example of your name, but the way your brain is processing the information, it's just so different.
Yeah, and like I said, it was super, super confusing. And if I would have been able to, read right now, I absorb information, like, that I'm interested in, almost like a sponge, because I listen to it through, like
Yeah, you
an
do.
app like Audible. And if I would have had that, when I was a kid, it would have been like a superpower for
Yeah.
me.
Or know that learning it from audio was way better for sure.
Like, ironically, I loved to sit in class in elementary school at the time of the day when we would be allowed to, like, draw while the teacher read books to us. Like, for whatever reason, combination of creating art while having a story read to you, I loved it, but I never put 2 and 2 together. Like, maybe I should find a way, maybe I could learn more in these classes, and maybe instead of being in certain classes, I would be in honors classes.
So whenever you're reading something, and as a kid too, would you just not understand it, or would you just like read it and forget it, or?
To this day, sometimes when I'm reading, and I'm sure like some people, if you're not interested in the content, you're going to have to read it multiple times. But I mean, like when I would sit there and try to read, it was my turn to read out loud. That's what the letters would look like.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy because of how you were feeling internally. That would you probably embarrassed and thinking like, why am I so different in that regard? Where my parents are telling me that I'm super smart, doing all these fractions when you were so young. So I cannot even imagine like the contradiction of and how you were feeling. And I'm sure you did not want to read out loud during class. That was probably one of the worst things for you.
No, I hated it so much that I wouldn't go to school.
Oh my gosh.
I wouldn't go to school, or all of a sudden I would have a headache, maybe.
Mm.
That's what I
Wow.
would say. It got to the point where my parents had to, like, they figured out that I might not have been being honest about being sick. I
Wow.
would even take the thermometer and put it under hot water so they would think I have a temperature, and they would take me to the doctor, and the doctor would be like, man, he doesn't have a temperature now.
Yeah. Again, going back to how this shaped you and anybody else with dyslexia, you're growing up so differently, and again, thinking that you're dumb, in a way, and your self-esteem was probably compromised as well. So I wonder what percentage of the population has dyslexia. Do you know?
I don't know the percentage, but I will mention that my mom always said, my mom's a retired math instructor, as you know. She always was like, Justin, you have to at least be in honors math. Like this is not, you should not just be in the regular classes. But on the flip side, I was like, Mom, I don't learn it. Like even though I'm good at math, like there was this breaking point for me in about the third grade, I think, third grade or so, because I would just annihilate pretty much everybody. There were a couple kids in the school that could hang with like the quick mental math. Pretty much like I was almost always the first one done with my math test until we got to long division.
Wow.
Because long division, when you first learn it, unless you're probably like savant level smart, you see this giant number and there's these weird rules that you have to follow to do this long division, where I was like, well, crap, I can't read and write very well. And still, even in that grade, I still, like, even to this day, if someone asks me to read something out loud in front of other people,
Yeah.
I'm not like, it's weird. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, my dad would get super pissed at me when like my spelling tests were terrible. Like all the way through elementary school, I would score terrible on spelling tests, even though I knew, like, I would study for the test. We would use flashcards. And when we were studying, like we would sit there and study and study and study and study with these flashcards. And then he would bring the same word up that I had just finally perfected like 2 minutes later, and I would screw it up again. And like to this day, like there's this app called Grammarly that we both use. English is her second language. So I recommended it to her, and I recommend it to anybody. I'm usually in the 97th or 98th percentile for my vocabulary. And I'm in like the anywhere from the 80th percentile to the 90 something percentile in production, like words analyzed per week. But my mistakes are like terrible. Like I'm in the bottom, like, I
Wow.
don't know.
Again, so contradicting too.
And to kind of come full circle on the confusing contradiction, that's one of the reasons I really got into sports, was because I was like, I can't hang with these kids in at least half the classes. Because another thing dyslexia does is it scrambles, especially stuff that you're forced to learn. Like most kids don't care about the history of some other state, or maybe even their own state. So another thing dyslexia will do is it will mix up your memories of factual information that you have to be tested on. In college, I had to study, and study and study, and it still wasn't enough. And so, come full circle, my mom, again, being a math instructor at a college at the time that I was in college, she was like, you need to go to the disability research center at the college, or disability center. I was like, Mom, I don't have a disability anymore. I got out of special ed in the second grade. And she was like, Justin, you beat dyslexia, but that doesn't mean you're not still dyslexic.
Right. Yeah.
And so, yeah, it changed my life. Sure enough, this guy that I think he ran the whole disability research center at the University of Wisconsin, Mark Letty, who hopefully we might even have on the show someday, because if he changed as many people's life, like he changed my life. I went from like not even I went from major to major in college because I couldn't find anything that I was as passionate about as football or cars. There wasn't like an automotive management degree like there is at some universities today, or at least a couple. And so like I hated school, like to come full circle, like to where we kind of started this part of the conversation. There was a case in which my mother like had to call my grandfather over to help round me up and take me to this elementary school. And then I ran as soon as he let go of me at the school all the way back home. A lot of people hate school, but I hated school so much that I would get like stomach pains from being in school. Like
Well,
hated it. Mark Letty at the McBurney Disability Research Center at the University of Wisconsin changed my life because after I took all those tests, I get these results. And it initially said that my intelligence was high average. And one of the things I did remember from when I was a kid is that my IQ was relatively high. And so I went in to meet with Mark, and he was like, "So have you seen your results?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "What did you think about them?" And I was like, pretty disappointed." And he was like, "Why?" He's like, "High average isn't bad." And I was like, I was a pretty well above average when I was younger. And he was like, "So this is your score with dyslexia. Do you want to know what your actual IQ probably is?" And I was like, "How is that not?" And he's like, "Dude, you have an unfair advantage. Like you just took a IQ test designed for people that don't have dyslexia."
well,
And I was like, "Okay, sure." And he was like, "So here are your component scores." And I mean, this test was like a multi-day test. It was a very in-depth IQ test. And he was like, this score here is your highest score. And it ironically, the test was you were given a bunch of numbers. It got harder and harder. You had like three numbers, like 317. And then you had to recite those numbers backwards. So 713. And the girl who was giving me the test kept looking at me like, and like she was running out of questions because I
well,
just kept going and
well,
going. And so anyways, he was like, "Yeah, he circled 139. He's like, "That's top 1%. He's like, so I get the chills again because I mean, it literally changed my life because
yeah.
he was like, "This means that uh, there's nothing, there's nothing that you can't do. Like, you can um, be a doctor or an engineer or like anything. Like, you have the potential to compete with the smartest people in pretty much any class, including the School of Business here." And, um, you can probably tell I get a little
Yeah,
emotional.
which is crazy. I do want to actually pause this and say, I think I've only seen you cry twice. One of them was when you lost one of your best friends. And so seeing you teary eye is like, oh my gosh, what is happening? So I love that you were obviously putting a lot of emotion, because you care. So wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it like I keep saying, I mean, it changed my life because that one conversation, with that, um, gentleman, Mark Letty, um, it, I went from sitting like at the back of class and thinking that, I mean, the University of Wisconsin School of Business, when I went, before I mean, hell, I had to like, even to get into the university, I had to first go to a community college because my GPA from Oklahoma State, where I started college, wasn't quite high enough to even get into the university. Then I get into the university and I'm still bouncing around from major to major because, ironically, my dad, being a CPA, CFO, when I was young, he would say, "Don't ever do what I do." And I put the entire realm of business, like corporate business, into the same bucket at that time. And so in college, when I went from pre-law to aviation science to pre-med, like all these different majors, psychology and sociology, all these different um, things, as I was wandering through college, I would be sitting there thinking, before I went to this meeting, I would be sitting there thinking, like, number one, I'm not nearly as passionate about this as these kids, and number two, the information is not sticking in my head.
Mm.
And so anyway, once I had that meeting and Mark told me what I'm capable of from a cognitive standpoint, I started sitting on the front row. Even though the School of Business, the University of Wisconsin School of Business undergrad program at the time, and I think maybe it's the same way, turned down 4 people for every one that it admitted.
Wow.
So, I mean, at one point, at that time, it had produced more Fortune 500 CEOs than Harvard.
Wow.
I mean, it was super competitive.
Yeah.
It was so competitive that you had to take prerequisite classes to even apply. And those classes were super hard and super competitive. And I mean, I would, in one case, or in one portion of that journey, I would be sitting in class and all of a sudden my heart would start beating like I had just run a 200-meter dash, just brrrr, and I thought something was wrong with my heart. So I went and saw a cardiologist and I had to wear this vent monitor thing that looked like a pager with electrodes that were taped to my chest and the wire ran through the side of my shirt. And I pushed a button every time it happened. He analyzed the data and had me come in and he was like, guess what the problem is? And I was like, my heart. And he's like, this is not a physical problem with your heart.
Wow.
This is stress. You're stressed. You're worried. And I was like, that's not how I think. And he was like, I can give you some medicine for it, but let's just see what this conversation does.
Wow.
And it never did it again.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So anyway,
I mean, it's relevant, obviously, because of who you are today, and it's going to make more sense for our audience as they continue to, know you more and learn more about your stories. A couple of things that I do want to mention. I mean, probably the reason why you didn't necessarily remember your parents saying that you were so great and so like smart and stuff like that is because they were your parents, right? I mean, they are supposed to say that you're smart for overall, that you can do everything. When it comes to a single person with authority, like the fact that they can change your life so much, that's why we're hoping that this podcast will help, other people, or how it will help other people, even connecting, other people. I really just hope that Mark Letty can be on the podcast one day, because that would be wonderful. The fact that he changed your life so much.
Yeah, yeah, and he was really, really good. The last time I tried to find him, he had been promoted or recruited to be in some position in Washington D.C. I'm
Wow.
pretty sure at like the federal level.
Nice.
So yeah, it's again, as you just said, this is why we're making time to do this.
Yes, on our super busy schedules, yeah, it's crazy, but it's going to be so worth it. Another thing that I wanted to point out, which I wrote here, I think everybody who has dyslexia, you guys had to work at least twice as hard. So that obviously shaped you since a very young age to try to be as normal and to have to, do things double the effort, double everything.
Well, two things. Number one, that 139 is in the top 1%, and he said that's your minimum. He's like, you answered so many questions correctly in that portion of the exam that you just hit the top 1%. So
Wow.
he's like, so just remember that. I was like, oh, I'll remember that. But as far as the percentage of the population and the coming back to the twice exceptional thing and people like Tom Cruise and if it was dyslexia specifically with Tom Cruise, I'm not positive, but I have read that his learning disabilities were so bad that he didn't really read much at all, even like
Wow.
at higher, I mean, I was reading still pretty well by,
Yeah.
fourth grade, third or fourth grade. I mean, I could sit there and read. I just didn't like to read out loud.
Wow.
But I've been told, taught, or read that Tom Cruise had a much harder problem for a longer time.
Wow.
With that being said, and the whole twice exceptional thing, and the Malcolm Gladwell book, Outliers, in that book, it's really interesting. If any of the people that are watching this know someone who's dyslexic or they have a child who's dyslexic, I highly recommend that they read that book because Malcolm dug really deep into these outliers, people who they have a learning disability, but they're a billionaire. They can't even read or write very well, but they're a billionaire.
Wow.
they can't read or write, but they can make it through an entire movie.
Wow.
Like Tom Cruise
Yeah.
couldn't read or write very well, but he is one of the most famous actors of all time.
Right.
Some people who are dyslexic are incredibly gifted musicians. So Malcolm, he did all this research and he found that it's a gift and a learning curse because people who are dyslexic are often more creative and they have better spatial recognition. So if you combine those two things, as you know, like I'll imagine something and I'll just start talking about like this is how it needs to look and this is what's going to happen,
Yeah.
this is why, and it creates situations both professionally and privately where I make incorrect assumptions, like because I see it.
Not all the people are thinking the exact same way as you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I see it. Like I see it. I mean, I took a test when I was in succession for manage higher levels of management when I was at Mercedes, and it was another big long test, and it was like Justin should not be responsible for managing the boots on the ground. He should be in a position where he talks about or develops plans and strategies and has team members who are responsible for taking the plans and delegating them and making sure that they're implemented. And I argued with that. I was like, I've done that successfully before, but the longer that I'm an entrepreneur, the longer that I'm in management, the more I learn that, yes, I
Yeah.
don't.
It's not that you can't do it, obviously, is that you succeed better in positions where you're strategizing. Yeah.
Yes.
I want to talk about your childhood when it came to being an athlete. I believe you play a lot of sports, specifically one more than any other. And I just know for a fact that being an athlete and being so involved in sports can truly shape everything for every kid. So let's dive in on that.
From a very young age, it was t-ball and soccer, and then ironically football, which became one of my favorites, if not my favorite. I didn't like it originally. I didn't like the brutality of it. The baseball, I was on a select baseball team by the time I was probably 12 or 13. Obviously made the A team in 7th grade. Football was, uh, you know, the, they couldn't cut anybody in the 7th grade. So we had an A team and a B team. That's why I said A team. But then basketball, they cut a lot of people. I made the basketball team, ran track and field, ran track, did field. The field side of things, the shot put in the discus, I always made it to city or one, I think. And those are typically the shot put in the big metal ball and the discus, which is like a giant, super heavy frisbee. Even though I was more on the slim and trim side, I would be competing with these giant linemen, the 300-pound guys, from the football team and stuff. So, like I said, I focused more on sports because I couldn't really, at the time, compete in the classroom. And yeah, by the time I was 15, I put together a team of wide receivers and tight ends from our regular football team. And we entered the Nike, at the time they had a contest called Air It Out, which had people from all over the region that would come and compete. It was a 5-on-5 football tournament. And yeah, we won we went as far as we could go in it with no like practice. We didn't even these people were showing up with uniforms and all this custom stuff, and we thought you were just supposed to wear the t-shirt that they gave you. So the only thing that we could our colors were red and black and white at our junior high and high school. And so we, just by the luck of the draw, I guess, we all had our red shorts on. So we had our red shorts and an aired out t-shirt that they gave us at the contest or at the competition. And yeah, we just dominated. We dominated so much that it was in the newspaper.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. And going back to when I was in 1st and 2nd grade, the special ed classes that I had to go to sucked. Number one, it sucked to be special ed. Number
Yeah.
two, it sucked to be only one of 2 or 3 people that had to go to special ed when everyone else got to stay in the normal class. And then number 3, you get into this room with a special ed teacher and she gives you a stack, of paper that's 20 or so deep. And like an entire page would just be dedicated to writing capital J's. So I had to sit there and write capital J's. It was like punishment. Like the beginning of The Simpsons where Bart Simpson's writing the same thing. I will not, I will not, I will not on the chalkboard, like capital J's. And then you get through that page and then it's like, oh, lowercase J's, and then all the way through the alphabet. And then you would finish the whole stack and then they would bring you another one.
Just so you know, I love that, by the way.
Yeah. Well,
It's like I would practice my script handwriting and stuff. So
yeah. Yeah. Well, it's it just
it's not efficient for you.
no.
Yeah.
No. So yeah. It on the one hand, it was embarrassing and frustrating and borderline depressing and confusing. On the other hand, it taught me discipline, a form of discipline that none of the other kids had.
Mm.
Like I didn't know it. I was a little kid.
Right.
I didn't even know what they were doing. For all I knew, they were just writing letters faster or combinations of letters. And I didn't know. Maybe they felt like they were being punished too. But yeah, it was an early form of discipline that I'm sure in some way, shape, or form affected me in a positive way.
Right. Right. Let's go back to you playing football.
I mean, I started working out in elementary school, like lifting weights. My sister had scoliosis, which for those of you that don't know, that's the curvature of the spine.
Mm.
I had a little bit of it, but my dad developed a special workout routine in an attempt to avoid us having to wear body casts to straighten our spines. And I just tagged along. He'd take my sister to do her workouts, and then I tagged along. And that got me into better shape than the average kid. And so, as I said, made the A team. The other sports teams, I was very successful. And yeah, I was the quarterback of that team that won the competition. And my dream was to be the next Troy Aikman, from the Dallas Cowboys.
How did that go?
Well, it didn't. We moved the summer before my junior year in high school to Chicago. My dad had an opportunity of a lifetime job offer up there. And we just touched on discipline. Like, yes, I had enough discipline to work out. Yes, I had enough discipline to sit there and write all those letters. And yes, I had enough discipline to make A's and B's in my classes. But I also didn't, like many kids, didn't have a really good grasp on reality. I lived in Dallas, Texas. I knew that. I knew about things like a Southern Draw and the Dallas Cowboys and, that kind of stuff. But when we moved from Dallas to Chicago that summer, number one, I didn't know anybody, and the summer wasn't over. So I go from having all these friends, and another thing I'll mention, this is part of the reason we're doing this podcast too, is I guess the best way to put it is my parents divorced when I was young. My sister was born a little bit late. She had failure to thrive or failure to strive. I always forget which word it is, but it means basically the same thing. As a result, she had to take a baby formula, because the failure to thrive or strive syndrome causes the baby to not want to consume breast milk.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't consume breast milk as a baby, you can literally die.
Right.
And so anyway, she, as a result of taking that formula, did not get the minerals necessary for her brain to fully develop properly. And the combination of the failure to strive, she was born a little bit late, so there might have been a lack of oxygen. That'd be more on the doctor. She was not a C-section. She probably should have been a C-section. So anyways, the combination of all those variables led to her on the cognitive side of things kind of getting capped at around the second grade level. So you combine becoming the big brother at a really young age.
Which is what age?
It became clear to me by the time I was about 5. So even though I was in having a hard time writing my name correctly, and she was 4 years older. There was this thing going on the sidelines, multiple things going on the sidelines that I didn't know about.
Wow.
So number one, Jamie, with my mom being a teacher, Jamie, and for those of you who don't know, my sister's name is Jamie. Jamie would go to a private school, kind of one private school at a time, with the intent for her to graduate from high school and be able to live a normal life. Because they didn't really know, when a brain is young, when a child is young, the brain continues to develop, I think, in men until they're like 25 or something like that. And in women, it's probably at least 20 also. So there was still a lot of hope, even though they knew that Jamie was different on a cognitive level. They didn't know how different.
Since you were experiencing that, and then also experiencing going to special ed, did you ever think like maybe I have a little bit of whatever she has?
I didn't really think about it like that, but like I said, around 5, so she would have been about 9. I became the big brother. Like it was again like super confusing. And again, my parents divorced when I was young. But that mission that my parents were on to get her to ensure she could live a normal life was um, incredibly difficult because imagine, having this beautiful, she was literally a model as a little girl, beautiful blonde hair, big blue eyes, like we'll probably be able to edit in some pictures. I'm sure we've got some somewhere, but um, beautiful. Like you have this beautiful little girl, and she walked. I believe she walked at a normal age and talked at a normal age. So my parents went from like this, literally like just like a beam of light, beautiful daughter to um, finding out that she had special needs, and then finding out that those special needs were a little bit more intense than average. And then she went from public school to private school, and again from private school, and then to private school, and then to private school. And again, the mission was for Jamie to live a normal life after she graduated from the high school that was at that school. They got the call one day. I believe it was when I was in preschool, that Jamie wasn't going to be able to go back to that school. And it was like from my recollection of it, it was like the last school in town that she could go to and still have a shot at living a normal life. So needless to say, that bit of news was devastating to my
Right.
parents. You combine all of those variables, me going from the younger brother to the big brother, cognitively, the um, learning disabilities of my own, the divorce. And then in the meantime, my dad was working insane hours. So, um, I mean, he was like, had to travel a lot. He was an audit partner at a big accounting firm. So we had nannies, which in Mexico are super common. In the United States, they're not as common. And, I should probably say this, we're talking about a lot of personal things here. But this is the whole point of this no surrender, right? We want to have deep conversations, right? Because with these deep conversations, people will hopefully relate and learn and grow. Um, so anyway, that devastating news was so devastating that to my mother that she had to take some medicine to try to help her not be so devastated. And it had such an extreme effect that she had to go away for long periods of time. And
Remind me again, at what age was that?
I was in preschool. So, yeah, it was incredibly difficult because I was both a mama's boy and a daddy's boy. And it was, I'm sure, just as difficult for her, So, anyway, again, you combine all these variables, and what did I have? I had my sister who was, um, she was still like my best friend. We were still siblings. But my dad was working a ton. My mom was devastated that she couldn't be with us more, but that her reaction to the medication caused her to be away. Like it took months to get her to the point where she could function normally as a result of the medication she was taking. And all I had left was, for the most part, during the days at least, and in the afternoons and evenings, were my friends. Going from Dallas and my friend network to Chicago was, I mean, you move from one country to another. I felt like the move from Dallas to Chicago was moving to a different universe, right? And like it was weird because with all that being said and all that stuff that happened in my childhood, I um still like I was different. Like in junior high and high school, I was different, right? I was a very competitive athlete on the one hand. On the other hand, at about the age of 15, I developed a wild spark. And we'll probably get on into some of those stories in other episodes too. But like I was driving at 15. I got a hardship license. I was introduced to alcohol at a relatively young age, and being, I guess there's probably some connection between the um, that first buzz you get from alcohol or that first drag you take off of a cigarette, and traumatic experiences. Actually, I know there's a combination because at one point I was a psychology and sociology major in college, and like you're if you have traumatic experiences when you're younger, you're more likely to engage in um,
Right.
that type of stuff, right? So um, I had a very diverse group of friends in junior high and high school, and as a result of my different personality and the different things that I did. So going from Dallas to Chicago and not knowing anybody, I I was on the varsity football team. I should have been the starter, but I was like so screwed up in the head from the move, and I didn't even know it. Like that's another thing that I think we should mention and that we'll discuss on this podcast is a lot of times people get into a position or a point in their life where they don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
Like they think that they rationalize what they're going through as like, no, I'm just fighting through this, or I'm normal. They're just trying to label me as something I'm not,
Yeah.
And so I was messed up. Like I was so like homesick by the time the football season started that those kids to this day probably don't like, I know that like there was one guy that I went out and practiced with a little bit, and he saw what like I was capable of doing, but I was so off that by the time the season started, like I said, yes, I was on the varsity football team, but I was not the starter. I should have been the starter. And even though I was a junior, I should have been the starter. And my inability and I will also say this, one of the reasons that I had the problems that I had up there is because going from Texas high school football at a 5A school, which is like, for anyone who's watching this that doesn't know about Texas high school football, it's like the best in the country, which means it's the best in the world. California and Florida like to say that they're as good, but
They like to say that.
yeah, I mean, when I lined up to the line of scrimmage as a quarterback in practice the first time, I'll never forget. I looked down and the varsity linemen, their splits. So splits are the spacing between the center, which is where the quarterback gets the ball, and then your guards, and then your tackles. So the linemen, they didn't even have their splits, like their spacing between each other correctly at the varsity level.
Hmm.
And I looked around, and at first, I think I said something to him, "Hey, get your splits right." And the coach was like, "What?" And I looked back at the coach. I'm like, "We're running a running play. We should have at least a couple more feet with this. We need to be able to run through this line."
Well,
And he was like, "Justin, don't worry about that right now. We're not. This isn't. We're not running this play all the way through, or something like that." And like it was like something clicked in my mind, like I don't belong here.
right. Right.
I don't,
And at that age is so crucial too.
yeah. And that I don't belong here tied back to many situations that already been.
Wow.
I don't belong in special ed, but I'm here. I don't belong in school, but I'm forced to be here. I don't belong.
So you hated it.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't, like I said, to this day, those kids never, like at that school, never got to see what I was capable of. And so you combine all that. I mean, I got arrested for stupid stuff, like alcohol, minor possession of alcohol type stuff. I got pulled over after I'd been drinking. Um, I was just doing a lot of, again, stupid stuff. So my parents forced me to drive all the way. We lived in a suburb of Chicago. They forced me to drive all the way downtown to one of the best psychiatrists. And I just sat there and told her, like, I don't need pills. I don't need to talk to you. I need to go home. Like home. Like,
Dallas.
yeah. And I'm sure that her conversations with my parents involved a lot of them telling her, like, that's not an option. You need to figure out what we have to do to get him to the point where he understands that he has to stay here. And as you know, I'm a little stubborn.
A little
Um,
bit.
so I don't give up. Again, no surrender. Like that's why we're here. And yeah, so I just kept telling her the same thing over and over again. Like I'm not like this is not home. Like I hate it here. And you can relate, I know, and we'll get to that and again in another episode because you've had the same type of feelings. Um So anyway, eventually they let me go back to Dallas.
Yes, I will say I was not forced to move somewhere, especially on my last year of high school. I mean, I did move on my last year of high school, but willingly, and not when I was the star of the show in a way, on the athlete team. So,
Yeah, yeah, it was and I'm not gonna lie, there was some like my sophomore year in high school was kind of rough too, before we moved. So due to the alcohol and stuff like that. Um, but I I just again and kind of where we started this part of the conversation was rock bottom, or that's been, one of the things we touched on. And the crazy thing is that I thought I knew what rock bottom was, right? Because as a kid, you don't know. Like, here I am living in a pretty darn nice house. I had a pretty darn nice car. I couldn't flip cars up there very well because we moved up there in July, just in time for winter to start, and my car was at the time a 96 Mustang Cobra, which did not do well in the snow at all. So that's another thing. I lost my car. Like it was literally parked in the driveway with this big pile of snow. Like my baby was like just covered in snow. Like, I mean, and yeah. So like you combine all those things, you take away my friends, you take away football, like my ability to play football, how I know how to play football, and you take away my car, even though it's sitting right there. Um, then you have a teenager. It was technically my junior year, so
gotcha.
second middle year of high school, and you create a situation that is very, very likely to cause what happened next. So, but I thought I knew what rock bottom was. I thought I knew. I felt like I knew, and I felt like I knew when I was younger at points. I mean, I'm not going to lie. There were points when I was a little boy where I missed, um, I missed my mom so much that like um, it especially like early in that process where like um, um, yeah, I'll just put it like this. I think we've already touched on, like I mentioned the word suicidal thoughts. Like when you hear that a little boy
Wow.
has like specific thoughts about how he'll do it,
Wow.
then you think you know what rock bottom is.
I didn't even know that you had those thoughts at that such a young age.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember like yesterday,
My gosh.
like laying in my bed thinking like, I wonder if I dove down to the bottom of the pool and just jam my fingers into the drain, then I won't be able to come back up. Like
Wow.
we we had a pool in our backyard, you know? Like, obviously I didn't do it. I didn't try to do it, but even for a little boy to be
Yeah,
thinking that,
that's just not right.
and it's not like this is very private and I'm sharing it very publicly again, so I can hopefully help other people. My child, just so everyone knows, yes, I had, my parents were gone a lot. Yes, I dealt with we had a number of nannies that came and went. But like I said, my dad was a partner at a big firm, accounting firm. We had plenty of food to eat. We weren't, borderline homeless or anything like that. So again, it's a whole like relativity type scenario, right? I kept thinking I knew what rock bottom was.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, everything's perspective, right? It's like a little kid coming to you and saying, "Oh, I had a really bad day." Well, you have to understand that for that kid, that was his day, you know?
Mhm.
And so of course, we're gonna connect with a lot of people that have gone through a lot too. Ultimately, if it's rock bottom for you, it's rock bottom for you. So that is your reality at the end of the day. So again, if you're going through anything and can relate to any of these stories, whether somebody like you did have a house or somebody who was entirely homeless their entire life, that's a cool part about this podcast, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and that reminds me of maybe we'll have him on too. Our friend who's a former Predator drone pilot, right?
Oh,
So,
wow. Yeah, that would be
um,
a great one too.
I mean, yeah, we'll that might be an episode, but a real quick little story from him is like he, due to being an officer in the military, Predator drone pilot, he had plenty of income. He and his family lived well. He had kids that were teenagers, and he was pretty strict. And his wife is more like the good cop. And he would come home and have to be strict, and his kids wouldn't even really want to talk to him. Meanwhile, during the day, he's sitting in what's like a closet with these big screens, and you think predator drone, that's predator means lethal, right? So he's flying these missions. A lot of people think, oh, you probably just see this grainy image and there's some terrorists, and you press a button and you watch the
Dust.
vehicle
Yeah.
explode.
Yeah.
Well, in reality, and I'm only going to be able to tell part of this story because I don't even know if some of it is like more on the classified. Like I don't. He didn't. He told me he couldn't tell me certain things and he didn't. So we're not going to jeopardize his security. He had top secret security clearance, but the bottom line is they don't just go and fly around and then click a button because someone else confirms they're a terrorist. They first have to run surveillance. So they basically are watching this person interact with their family members,
Mm,
and
my
and
gosh.
they have to build the case for the termination of this target before they actually terminate the target. And the reason I'm telling this story is because he could see in such detail the interactions that these terrorists had with their family members, that that these kids had no shirts on, they had no shoes in many cases, but they were still more happy to see their dad
Right.
than his own kids were here in the United States.
Wow.
Again, I get the chills because he's sitting there thinking like, I'm probably gonna have to kill this man and take him away from those babies that are so much happier to see him than his own kids are in this much, much greater country,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? So yeah, it's all relative.
It is all relative, especially, yeah, and I mean, coming from another culture, I, I'm just I'm just amazed at the opportunities that the United States can give a person, whereas in other countries it can be very rough. So having at least that perspective helps me understand and appreciate it a lot more than a lot of people probably do. But then again, as you just said, they just don't know any better kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, I thought I hit rock bottom in Chicago, even though I had been through a decent amount, more than average for many kids on the one hand. On the other hand, I would get into trouble as a little boy. My dad would take me down to the orphanage, like literally take me down there and show it to me and say, he would try to show me, like, give me some relative, comparisons um, to the life that we lived. But I didn't, and I would think about that, and that was very disturbing. Like I would feel sorry for those. I didn't see the little kids. He would just show me this is I think it's like the Buckner Boulevard orphanage or whatever. And but with that being said, you're as a little kid, you're only going to think about that for so long,
Sure.
you know. So anyway, I thought I knew what rock bottom was, and I finally convinced them into letting me move back to Dallas, and um, all hell ended up breaking loose. Moved back to Dallas, and I quickly tried to make up for lost times, and was I was living with my grandparents, and since I was both wild and an athlete that needed to get back out on the field, and I was a kid still. I was That's another thing. They didn't let me take my car. I think they thought that if they kept my car in Chicago that I wouldn't have gone, but I was like, I'll leave the car.
Even though it was yours, right?
Yeah.
Well,
It was the car that, yeah, like I said, I had 4 cars by the time I was 17. Um, just bought the Mustang, sold it, bought a Chevelle, sold it. Or actually, the Mustang I traded for another Mustang plus some money. Then I sold that Mustang, bought a Chevelle, so anyways, that more modern Cobra it just made a lot more sense to be a car that was driven daily. But anyway, yeah, I came back. My mind was out of whack, and um, I to make this part of the story relatively short, I was nearly beaten to death by our high school spirit squad. I um, had to have facial cranial reconstructive surgery, and that, like, to this day, I've got a plate with multiple screws on the side of my face. I'll never squint like right again, like with that left eye. And it was an unprovoked. Um, to this day, I don't know how big of a setup it was, but it had to do with some drama that involved uh, uh, I'm trying to think of the most politically correct way because this part of the story involves other people, that I don't, if a lot of people view this podcast, then I don't want to bring that back up for them. Um, but I will just put it like this. A situation occurred that involved a spirit squad that was not your typical spirit squad. They were founded back in 1970, and they started out as just kind of playing pranks. I'm not even going to say the name of the group, just because I don't want this to become about that. Um, they started out just kind of playing pranks on other schools. They would take a big bed sheet and spray paint some crazy flag or message that would become a flag, and they would go raise that flag on the flag posts on a Friday game day, football game day, to antagonize the other school, let them know that Lake Highlands Spirit Squad had been there, and to watch out because we were going to whoop their butts on the football field that night. And over the years, they kind of mutated into um, almost like a fraternity at the high school. And it was an honor to be a member of this group. So I was involved in a situation where I needed to get their permission to do something. And I got what I believed was their permission to do that. And it turns out, and ironically, I got that permission from, speaking of sports, like a guy that I grew up playing Pee Wee soccer with. I'd known him since I was literally like 5 or 6 years old. Um, got permission. to do what I did, and or thought I got permission. And then not too long thereafter, I was pulled out of or instructed to get out of a vehicle, distracted. And as soon as I looked away, I was sucker punched in the face and then assaulted by several members of this group. And um, yeah, the doctor said that if I were to have been hit or kicked one more time in this portion of my head, that I would have probably ended up as either a vegetable or dead.
Well,
Uh, so, needless to say, the surgeon that did all of the reconstruction work told me that I couldn't play any contact sports for 18 months.
wow.
So came back for the second half of my junior year and was told I couldn't play my senior year. So I couldn't get back on the football field again. So um it it was it was definitely ironically, when I was on the ground, all I could think of was like, first of all, I was knocked out temporarily. Second, all I could think of was like fight for my life, literally. But the adrenaline was flowing so much through my veins that, or there was so much adrenaline in my veins that it didn't really hurt that much. The first unexpected shot hurt and it temporarily blinded me.
Mm.
But um after, like, I was out and then I woke back up while I was still on the ground getting beaten. And by the grace of God, like, to this day, I wonder the name of the officer that drove by, because that's all it took
Mm.
was a police officer to drive by. Like, and the street was like 50 yards away or more, like 150 feet plus away. But all it took was someone in one of the vehicles to say, "Cops, cops." And they ran off, but I was still blind.
Wow.
So I had to go to the voice of one of the friends that I was with. Well, there was one female with us that night, and she was just yelling my name.
Mm.
So I just went towards the sound of her voice
Oh my gosh.
and got back into the Bronco that we were in that night. And so the related fallout from that was insane, totally insane. Like, I thought I had hit rock bottom. Then I come back to where I want to be. I'm nearly beaten to death. I'm going to school all because they can't do the surgery until the swelling goes down.
Wow.
So they said that the piece of bone between like my eyebrow area and the top of the cartilage, where the cartilage starts in my nose, was in 27 pieces.
Oh my God.
My orbital lobe was completely fractured. So normally your eye sits like this and the bone below it. Mine was like this. So I had to go to school and and looked like a someone that had nearly been beaten to death until I recovered enough to then turn back around and get facial cranial reconstructive surgery. So rock bottom, that's a lot closer. Nearly dying and then dealing with the aftermath of that. Meanwhile, those three guys that were a member of that spirit squad were charged with,
It was a big deal in Dallas. It was in
yeah,
the Dallas Morning News, correct?
yeah, it was a story in the Dallas Morning News, or there was a story in the Dallas Morning News about it, and those kids were expelled from the high school, those three. Um, and I had other friends that were either wanting to become members of that group. It's for seniors only, or it was for seniors only.
Wow.
So it turned into this, like, really, I'm just going to say it, fucked up situation, because I came back and I was reconnecting with all my friends, and then I was potentially set up by some of those friends, or I was by one for sure set up. And then the way that it all went down, there might have been multiple people who I thought were my friends that set me up. Then it created, when those three guys got expelled, it created this pro Justin or against Justin,
Wow.
for Justin or against Justin, because of course the seniors were pissed that their buddies got expelled,
Mm.
and the spirit squad's stance on it was infuriation. And my parents were like, you're not safe there anymore. And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. They're like, you have to leave. And I'm like, I'm not leaving. And to go to a third high school within a 12-month period, it's like, I'm not doing it. And again, you know me, never surrender, right? So I was like, I'm not doing it. And they were like, there's the door. Because by that time, my stepmother was commuting back and forth from Dallas to Chicago because her job was still in Dallas initially. And by that time, she and I were living in an apartment. I'd moved out of my grandparents' house, so another move. Um, and um, my dad and stepmother were like, we're concerned for your safety, and if you don't either go down to Temple, Texas, where my mom and stepfather lived at the time, or back to Chicago, then you're no longer allowed to stay in this apartment. And I was like, so homeless at 17 after being being moved from Dallas to Chicago, having a disaster up there, moving back, nearly dying, reconstructive surgery, homeless.
Sounds like something out of a movie. And of course, you're telling the story, right? And for somebody to try to relate to your story, you really need to put yourself in those shoes. I just cannot imagine being homeless, like literally have nowhere to go.
Yeah, and at that age as a minor, it was hard to even get a motel. So I tried to stay with some friends, and my dad is probably as stubborn or more stubborn than I am. And so he would call my friend's parents and be like, do not let my son stay there. He needs to be safe with either us here in Chicago or his mother down in Temple. I, I, I'll just put it this way. Cause again, we're talking about personal things, but I don't want it to get ultra personal. Um, I'll just put it like this. My dad, due to his position and his success, he made it clear to my friend's parents that there would be problems, big problems, if they let me stay with their families. So again, I wasn't 18. I had no ability to lease an apartment because I wasn't 18. I had no money to lease an apartment. And it was even hard to get a motel room. So, um, yeah, that I'm probably going to have to like leave kind of right there just because, um, when you consider all those variables, there are very few ways to survive.
Yeah, yeah. I like the fact that we just decided that we're gonna do this in series. This is the series, the first episode of your childhood, and basically before you became a grown-up adult. There's a lot of things that happen afterwards, in between bankruptcy, near bankruptcy, and a lot of different things that we're gonna talk about on other episodes. How do you want to close this?
Well, as I think you might have mentioned, there's like 20 something questions.
Yeah, we covered 5.
Yeah, so I sat down and just started typing. I will say that one more small little story to kind of maybe close it on here is, and she mentioned a bankruptcy um that we'll cover in another episode. Um I opened a business in like the worst possible time, which ironically the logo for that business is right here. Benchmark Classics was the name of it. We ended up, being featured in the New York Times back when that meant a lot more than it does now. Nothing against the New York Times now. It's just when the physical papers were printed, it was a big deal to actually get that Sunday edition of the New York Times and see your story on the cover of the New York Times, and then a whole full spread in the automotive section about your business and a project that you're working on. Anyway, so yeah, I will cover that in another episode. But the inspiration point, like the light bulb moment, literal was like a light um, moment to lead to the creation of No Surrender was um, recently with my current group of companies, I had a situation. Again, I'm not going to get into too many details right now because we're limited on time. But uh, and it's not just this one time that I've been close to bankruptcy again. It's been a recurring thing when considering COVID and the related rate hikes, and um, it's been a near, not constant, but a steady threat of like running out of money for the majority of the last 9.5 years. Because I was growing, 8 expansions in 8 years. We grew and grew and grew. Even we found a way to grow in like 2020, like when COVID was full bore, you know? Um, so anyway, this story that I'm going to tell in the next episode uh, was the Cliff Notes version of it is that we came like as close as I could get to another bankruptcy, or being forced into another bankruptcy by some terroristic activity that was engaged in by people that I formerly paid to work for me. Um, and I got to a point where it seemed like there was absolutely no way out. And I every morning, my morning routine starts with prayer and meditation. And that day is like Judgment Day. I'm gonna have to look back and figure out the exact date because that's important.
Yeah.
I was doing my morning prayer and meditation, and um, it was like unlike any other prayer or meditation session for me. I literally saw a light. Like my eyes were closed, but there was a white glow. And yeah, it was like this feeling of like positive go, like don't stop, right? Don't surrender, no surrender, basically. And here we are on the No Surrender show. It wasn't called that then. We didn't. It wasn't even conceived at that time. You know,
Not at all.
no. So I like literally saw the light with my eyes closed, and that is what, like, that day, that session, that decision to keep fighting was what created the next light bulb moment, which was when we were sitting at our Sunday, or almost every Sunday, we go to the same restaurant and have lunch. And I just like had this, again, light bulb moment where I was like, I think we need to create a place where people can share what they've been through. You know, if they've been through a lot, where they can share it. And even though it's personal stuff, share it publicly. And as a result, hopefully help others.
Right.
And that goes hand in hand with tithing, which I'd known, you know, growing up, going to church, that there was communion and giving to the church. But the word tithing I'd never heard of, which I'm going to tell that and, you know, the story of that in another episode. You know, giving back. It's not just money. Tithing is, they say 1/10 of your income needs to go to the church and the Holy Bible, the Christian Bible. And I'm sure other religions have their own methods of giving a portion of your monetary income. But Amy Lord, who's going to be one of our, she's guest number 2 after me. I'm kind of like episode 0, or we're episode 0. And then number 1 is Mark Devine, who is just Google his name, former Navy SEAL commander, New York Times bestselling author, successful entrepreneur.
Your mentor.
My mentor. He's been my mentor for years. I'm going to tell that story at the beginning, probably, of his episode. I'll talk about how I talked this New York Times bestselling author, Navy SEAL commander, leadership guru, PhD, MBA, CPA, into being Justin Cole in Dallas, Texas's mentor, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, Amy is a Christian singer, has been through hell and back, lost everything multiple times. And I had shared this concept with you at lunch, and then we'll get the exact dates, but within a week or so, I was on the phone with her about a business related matter, and just like out of the blue, the conversation went from business to something difficult or something, and I was like, I just had this feeling like I should get her opinion on it, and I did, and she was like, "Oh my God, Justin, that's like I can already tell that you're like onto something. Like I don't even know you that well, but like this is a great idea. Have you heard of tithing?" And she explained to me that it's not just money, right? So I have no money to give. Like there's money in our account, in our my personal account and my business account, but that money I cannot donate any of that money because I have to pay payroll. Like there's no extra money right now. As a matter of fact, we haven't, like, just to be frank and completely honest, I mean, we've been struggling for 3.5 years, my companies. We grew and grew and grew. And then you and I we made what we thought was a well-educated decision to buy a multi-million-dollar building right before March of 2022 when the rate hikes started to, our government had to attempt to curb inflation, so we had absolutely nothing, no bit of evidence that led us to believe that we shouldn't buy this building. We bought it and thought we made a great decision. And it's not necessarily that we made a bad decision because things have worked out in interesting ways since then. We did about $500,000 worth of renovations to this building, and as a result, because it was actually flooded before we bought it, and those renovations and the appreciation and value and the increase of cost for construction have created a decent amount of equity in this building. So God works in mysterious ways. Um, but anyway, back to the tithing, Amy was like, don't worry about the money. She's like, and even if you only help one person, like just start sharing, like share your story, let other people like do exactly what you're saying. Let other people share their stories.
If you're watching this, you may not know Justin much, even though you already learn a lot about why he's the way he is. But he truly is gifted. He's listened to over 400 books, and as you can probably tell, he like knows how to recite them, and he remembers the titles and remembers what the books are talking about. I listen to books, and seriously, sometimes some things stick, some things don't, but you're different, and you're able to have a lot of deep conversations where somebody talks to you and they feel like they grew as a person. And I feel bad saying this, and I've said this to you before, specifically yesterday, as we were filming an episode for my podcast, Bridal Club. It's been the pleasure of my life being married to you for 2 years. It's our anniversary is around this time, actually today, when we're launching this. And it's been great. We've been together for 10 years. However, it's been the most difficult journey of my life. I mean, you'll learn more about me on my episode, I'm sure. I also have a business. We've been through so much, but it was so frustrating to me to know that he was working 18 hours a day, or I don't even know how many hours a day you work, including Sundays, where I feel like the moments where we are together and you're totally present, which they're not that many. I mean, obviously at night, on the weekend, only on Sundays. However, I feel like with my own life, you're not, when it comes to like my family or things that I do on Saturdays where you work as well, you're not necessarily present or a part of. And so knowing for a fact that he works his ass off, and obviously things have happened to where he almost lost everything again, and him being so busy that he cannot give back, it has been so frustrating to me. So whenever this idea came about, I'm like, you need to do it, and you need to do it now. And I know you're so busy, and I know it's so contradicting to what you should be doing, but we need to do it. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make this possible. And I'm just so glad that we're doing this. I know this specific episode, we didn't cover the rainbows and stars and all of that. It was more about the background, your background, so people understand where you're coming from. But there's a lot to uncover. There's just like this chapter, there's going to be 3 more chapters at least with crazy stories, so you can relate a little bit more. But obviously, the whole idea of the podcast is to rise up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's As if you haven't been to our website, I recommend visiting nosurrendershow.com. I've always loved quotes because I believe that there's a lot of beauty in simplicity, and sometimes just a tiny little quote can do so much,
Yeah.
and one of them from Muhammad Ali goes something like, "It's not about getting down, or getting knocked down, it's about getting up," you
Yeah.
know, or it's not about the number of times you get knocked down, it's about the number of times you get up. And um, two of my other um, big, big like hero type people. And all these guys are, they were famous, and I'm not talking about their personal lives. Arnold Schwarzenegger is another one. Obviously, his personal life is all over. It's been public about things that were positive that he did in his personal life, but I highly recommend you watch his video called "The Video That Broke the Internet." It's the only video we have on our website right now on the homepage.
We'll also link it so you
Yeah.
can just click down below.
Yeah. But anyway, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Carol Shelby is another one. Um, with Arnold, the saying is there's no plan B. He does, if you watch the video, you'll see like he's like, I hate plan B. There is no plan B. Every bit of energy you spend thinking on plan B is energy you're wasting, because you should be spending it thinking about plan A. Everything has to be about winning. You can pivot, and keep going, and you can fail. It's okay to fail, and stuff like that. I mean, it's just like I mean, they don't call it the video that broke the internet for no reason. And then, as far as Carroll Shelby goes, he went from like, I mean, in the 50s, he won Le Mans, the 24 hours of Le Mans as a driver, as an American, which was super unheard of back then. And then his career as a driver got ended because of a heart condition, and that led to him building all these incredible cars, the Shelby Cobra, the Mustang, Shelby GT3 350, the GT 500, all these incredible cars. But Carroll, no surrender. He like Arnold Carroll, we've already touched on Mark Devine. We're going to talk about other, and hopefully even eventually have them on the show, people like Jocko Willink and David Goggins, who are also former SEALs. Mark is different from me because he and I connect in a much more, I guess you could say, uh, like wavelength kind of way. Like, he's so smart in his books. Like, again, just Google him. You'll see the first book. I'll just go ahead, and I know we're about to wrap this episode up, but Way of the Seal wasn't his first book, but I think that was the first book of his that I read that kind of got me hooked on his books. It just clicked for me. But these people that I look up to, um, and that I have studied, are they all have that. Pretty much all of them have that in common. No surrender.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. People that don't have crazy stories like that perhaps don't have, they haven't built something amazing. And it's because of those stories that they actually do. If you're a woman, I'll just say this just because you can probably relate. I have a flower business, so let the flowers remind you why the rain is so necessary. So, again, this podcast was born due to his struggles throughout his life. And so there's obviously something really positive coming through something so negative.
Yeah, lots of obstacles. Um, Ironically, I was watching a podcast with Joe Dispenza. He was being interviewed by Stephen Bartlett, the host of the Diary of a CEO podcast, just this morning.
Mm.
Ironically, uh, Dr. Joe Dispenza wrote The Placebo Effect and other books that I also have read and love. But he mentioned in that episode that I watched today, or a portion of the episode that I watched today, that a lot of people who feel like they're broken become unbroken at just one of his seminars by realizing that the struggle is what built you.
Wow.
It's,
Wow.
yeah. And so just in like I get the chills. I've gotten the chills, I think, for the third time now. The stuff you've been through is what builds character. If it breaks you, that's still in your head.
Yeah.
You have decided that you were broken. And I have felt like I was broken multiple times. But again, it's about getting up, right? So,
Right.
but again, these people, they go to his seminars and they walk in case there have been cases where people go in a wheelchair and they've been in a wheelchair for a long time and they walk out,
Oh my God.
like physical healings.
Wow.
And it's all in your head. It's not 100% in your head, but
A lot of it is.
your subconscious, they say that your subconscious controls 95%
Wow.
of your conscious.
And then you also mentioned something yesterday about the human body telling you that you're giving up at 40%.
Yeah, it was in one of the books from Mark or one of the other SEALs, maybe Goggins. They're taught at BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition School, when they're becoming Navy SEALs, that because they have to go through Hell Week. And I think, don't quote me on this, but I think during that week, they're only allowed to sleep 4 hours. And they learn that the human body naturally tells you to stop or quit when it's at about 40% of what it's capable of.
Wow.
40%. And Mark, he told me that when you're going through that, I don't know if it's most, I don't know if the majority that make it that far quit or not, but many of them do. That's one of the reasons it's so hard, is to weed out the weaker members of the buds class or classes. But he was like, you think that's bad? Wait until you get into combat and you realize you could die at any second. So for all of those people out there who think that they should protest our soldiers or spit on them or publicly ridicule them because they're sent on missions that may have to do with a government that's not necessarily 100% straight, you're badly mistaken, because to go from this incredibly gifted reality that we live here in the United States over to some of the worst places on this planet, as far as we know, universe, and potentially sacrifice their lives so we get to keep our freedom.
Right.
Like, it's wild that it's even permitted. And you don't see that as much anymore, but there's been a lot of protests and I'm not trying to get political here, because a lot of wars are fought. I'm sure most wars are probably fought for reasons that are not worthy of killing
Oh yeah.
many people. We'll touch on that in other episodes. And that's, I think, and I'll kind of probably end it with this. Another one of the reasons I've connected so well with Mark is that he's gone from this super elite. Not only was he a Navy SEAL, he was the honor man in his buds class, which I believe means like the elected leader of the class by his peers. It's either by his peers or by all the instructors. Don't quote me on that either. I think that's what it is, but honor man of his buds class. Commander is the highest level. So he was a leader of SEALs. And then after that, he was involved with some really high level organizational type stuff for the special forces. Been through all that, right? As a professional, I hate to say it, but special forces are there to go and eliminate targets or rescue hostages. And in order to rescue hostages, in many cases, you have to eliminate targets or terrorists or whatever, right? So they're literally some of the most badass motherfuckers on the planet.
Yeah.
He's gone from that, and he's still, don't get me wrong, he's as deadly now, or maybe even more deadly than he was then. But he's gone from that to positive peace. Like, I'm not going to say like the hippie side, but very much spiritual in a way that is, and we'll cover it, I don't know if we'll cover it in his first episode because I don't know how far we're going to be able to get. We're scheduled for 2 hours. I don't know how far we're going to be able to get because
Wow.
I have as many questions for him or more
Oh my God.
than we had for me. And we made it less than 20% of the way through my questions. So anyway, he like the word enlightened in many cases is reserved for holy people. But enlightenment is 100% attainable by any person on this planet. Any person on this planet who can communicate
Wow.
can become enlightened. And you get into a lot of the Eastern um, spiritual type stuff and surrender. So this is the final like closing to the episode. We'll talk about the no surrender logo. Red, no, never give up. Surrender is in white because that's the light. You surrender only to your higher power, your God. And I'm going to go even a step further and say that we are all God. It's deep and it's like most people are going to, what the hell is this guy talking about? I don't even know if I'm going to keep watching his episodes, but you surrender like this Joe Dispenza guy that I mentioned. He is so good. He's done so much research, and it's not some quack that's doing this weird craft stuff that is just taking people's money. He's got the data to prove the results, right?
Mm.
But the bottom line is you release the negative. Like the vast majority of people you meet will be holding on to something negative. And we touched on this too in your episode. The guilt, the negativity, the internal pain, and they let that live rent free in their head and control their lives and their family members' lives for so long, right? So this show is as much about surrender as it is no surrender, right? So you've got to surrender to the right energy to get the right energy. And you can't ever give up on your way there.
I love it. I love it. I am super excited to hear your conversation with Mark Divine. As he said, definitely Google Mark Divine. Hopefully, you do it when you're listening to this episode and submit some questions on our nosurrendershow.com website.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Like I said, or she said, Mark Divine. And then we've got Amy Lord as episode number 2. We've got some other people lined up for other episodes. We're not just focusing on people that Amy's got tens of thousands of followers. Mark Divine's got, he's affected millions of lives in a positive way. We're also going to have people come on that, are people that I know or who I've met or who Andrea has met that, don't necessarily have even hundreds of followers, but they have a story,
Yes.
a story that provides insight into getting through tough times or, helping others in some way. We're going to do everything we can to ensure that every episode brings positivity and value to the viewers. So definitely appreciate you to like and subscribe and continue to join us.
Definitely. And if you have a story like that as well, please do share with us, as we would love to talk to you too.
Yeah. Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
All right. Well, until next time.
till next time. Thank you.
Thank you.